What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9, and we're coming here with a video showing a Boba Fett deck, a little different than what's most prevalent in the meta. I'm currently playing an Aggression Boba build, and I'm playing against a Command Luke. Now, Command Luke seems to be the most popular deck right now, but with some new cards revealed, given some stuff for some other strategies, I've been trying some other stuff out. So this is going to be Aggression Boba using it's using this new Imperial Raider capital ship, which is it's an interesting card. And that card, we'll see if it ends up being relevant, but the Ruthless Raider is a 6 cost 4/6. When played or when defeated, you deal 2 damage to an enemy base and 2 damage to an enemy unit. So that's an interesting card. Definitely one making its appearance here. In this game, though, we're going to lead off. My opponent plays the Battlefield Marine, very strong card, 2 cost 33 vanilla, and I'm going to play Greedo, 1 cost 3/1, and when defeated, deals 2 damage to a unit if you discard the top card of your deck, and it is a non-unit. So in this deck, I believe it's between a 1 in 4 and 1 in 3 chance, so not super reliable, but can be useful when it goes off. So my opponent plays out a Wing Leader, buffing up the Battlefield Marine up to a 5/5, not what I most want to see here. I'm going to respond by playing I play an ISB agent, and I ping the wing leader off the board. This is probably a misplay. I think what I should have done here is just attack the enemy base with Greedo. So I am kind of playing aggro, and I think it's better for me to try to push more damage through. My opponent takes this opportunity to hit Greedo with the Battlefield Marine, and I missed the top deck. So if I had hit the top deck, the 2 damage from Greedo would have killed the Marine. But because I missed it, the Marine is still on the field. So I'm not going to get a chance to attack with Greedo. Would probably rather have just taken the swing there. Bit of a misplay there on my side. So I'm going to bring out Boba Disintegrator. The good news is that this deck is running is running a Tarkin Town base here. So that's epic action, deal 3 damage to a damaged non-leader unit. So I'm just going to use that to clear the Battlefield Marine off the board. And we're going into turn 3. No damage on the bases, which is not what I want. I think Luke's late game is better than my late game, but I do have a substantial board advantage right now, and we're going to see what I can do with it. So there actually is the Ruthless Raider in hand, that card on the right side. And it is I'm going to highlight it here, 6 cost 4/6 Imperial Vehicle Capital Ship. When played and when defeated, deal 2 damage to an enemy base and 2 damage to an enemy unit. Direct damage to the base is pretty good, and I was thinking it might be a nice capstone card for this aggro deck in addition to Fett's Fire Spray, which is, of course, also very good in that role. Kind of giving me some late game powerful units that I can bring out in order to do that final damage to the enemy base and hopefully close out the game. At least that's the game plan. Right now, Boba Disintegrator and the ISB agent kind of hanging out in the ground arena, 4 damage to my opponent's base conceivably this turn. And I do intend to deploy the 7th Fleet Defender and get something going in the space arena as well. My opponent brings out Yoda. Um, Yoda is a 3 cost 2/4 with Restore 2, and when defeated, you may draw a card. I believe it's actually you may choose any number of players to draw a card, so you can make your opponent draw. Because because I'm aggro, I'm not focused on killing Yoda, I'm just pushing damage to the base. I do decide to have the ISB agent remove Yoda's shield, though. I'm trying to keep him in range to potentially be killed by Boba. If Yoda gets to attack a bunch of times, the Restore will be strong. This way I can potentially kill him with Boba Fett, my leader, once he deploys. Also giving me an opportunity to get the resource back from Boba defeating a unit, which could allow me to make some more plays. So here I draw Fett's Fire Spray and Bosk. Bosk is a great card for this turn. Fett's Fire Spray and the Raider are both pretty big. I end up deciding to resource the No Good to Me Dead that I have in hand. While that is a good counter to Luke, Luke probably won't deploy for another turn, and right now I am focused on trying to push damage to the enemy base rather than trying to control the board. This is definitely I'm viewing myself as the aggressor, and I would rather be spending my resources on deploying blast, fire spray, one of those big units rather than fighting with my opponent's units. And so my opponent leads off with a Jedi lightsaber on Yoda. This is actually a big problem for me. So this gives Yoda +3/+3, and because he is a force unit, it also gives him on attack give the defender -2/-2. So that actually means that Yoda's attack can now kill Boba the leader in one hit because he is 5/5 and gives Boba -2/-2 for the turn. Can also, of course, defeat Boba Disintegrator in one hit. I decide to just take the swing with Boba Disintegrator, 3 damage to the base. But this Yoda is a potentially a big obstacle to me, and I'm gonna try to just hit the gas, put more units on the board, and get things over with before that ends up doing too much damage. Now, I will say that Yoda's an additional problem in that he has Restore 2, so he's slowing down my aggro while he takes out those units. A Jedi lightsaber on Yoda is a very strong play. The counter to that, of course, would be Waylay, but I don't believe I see one. In fact, I'm not actually sure. Believe it or not, I'm not actually sure if I have Waylay in the deck. And before you say that I'm crazy for not playing Waylay, I think that's probably an error on my part, and the deck should have Waylay. It's a really good card with Boba because you can effectively use it for 2 resources instead of 3, because a unit leaving play will trigger Boba's ability to give you that resource back. So my opponent brings out a Restored Arc. After my defender takes a swing, I'm going to deploy Boba, and I'm just focused. I'm focused on the base. I want damage on the base. I don't really care very much about my opponent having this scary stuff. What I want to do is get damage on the base and then close out the game with my big ships there. I play Bosk but decline to ambush him. I just want Bosk on field. The only thing that I want Bosk for right now is just having another unit out there. If I draw events, his ability could be really good. Unfortunately, I don't draw any events, so I'm not going to be able to get that bonus damage. Yoda can, of course, just kill Bosk in one attack anyway with that lightsaber to buff him up, but it's another unit that could potentially swing for 4. And now, since I have both Bosk and Boba on the field, my opponent's Yoda can only stop one of them. The other one's going to get 4 damage into the base. I could potentially do some more damage with my ISB agent and defender, and then I'll be able to play Fet's Fire Spray and do another 5 damage. So hopefully, if all goes well, of course, it's possible that my opponent will have a good counter, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see just how this turn develops. Of course, Luke Skywalker will also be deploying this turn. So at this point, I'm giving up on any attempt to control the ground arena. I'm just saying, you know what? The ground arena is lost. Luke's going to show up. This Yoda can defeat my stuff easily. I'm not even going to try to defeat it. I'm just going to try to push more damage to the base and close things out with my big spaceships and win the game that way. So Yoda indeed defeats Boba. Repairing the base as well, only taking 2 damage because the -2/-2 from the Jedi lightsaber debuffs Boba's return damage. So very strong combination of cards there with that Jedi lightsaber, really causing me some problems. Bosk swings in for 4. Obi-Wan deployed. At this point, I don't really care though. I have already decided that this arena is lost, so I am not very interested in that. My defender could, of course, defeat that restored arc and remain alive, but I don't really care about defeating that restored arc. I care about pushing more damage to the base, so I am just going for the base, even though I have a very favorable attack that I could make. My opponent will probably deploy Luke and could put a shield on that restored arc, and I'm just not really very concerned with that. I am concerned with damage to the base, and so I'm going to deploy Fet's Fire Spray, and I'm going to swing him in there and do 5 more damage, and then hopefully close out the game next turn with my spaceships. Um, so now we're going to see Fet's Fire Spray on the field. My opponent deployed Luke. Fet's Fire Spray can swing in this turn for 5, and then next turn another 5 would be lethal. So very favorable situation for me right now, even though the ground arena is totally out of control with that Yoda. And Luke and Obi-Wan, I think it's unlikely that I'll land a single hit in the ground arena for the rest of the game because Obi-Wan's in control there, and um, Luke and Yoda backing him up. But I'm not very concerned with landing hits in the ground arena. I'm not really playing for board control. I am playing to destroy the enemy base. And so now the enemy base is on 3 life. My opponent takes the initiative in order to have a chance to potentially draw some kind of counter. I'm not sure what it would be. But at this point, it doesn't really matter. So even if we see an immediate Yoda attack to heal 2, Fet's Fire Spray attacks and wins. If we see a Vanquish to defeat Fet's Fire Spray, then the Defender attacks and wins. I think the best thing my opponent could have in this situation would probably be, I think the best thing my opponent could have in this situation would be Bright Hope. So by playing Bright Hope, that could put a Sentinel into the space arena that would prevent either of my units from attacking and give him some time to get his healing going. But even then, I think I would be able to win this turn. I could surprise strike the Bright Hope with the Defender, get it off the field, still have Fet's Fire Spray in position to attack and clear the base. My opponent could potentially heal one additional point of damage by using the arc in addition to the 2 healing from Yoda, which would put him at 6 life remaining on base and mean that Fet's Fire Spray would not win in one shot. But in that situation, I would be able to play the Relentless Raider and deal or the Ruthless Raider and deal 2 damage to the base directly, which would win the game. So I think I'm in a pretty good position almost regardless of what my opponent has. In this case, my opponent has Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight, who could give the Fire Spray -3/-3, but that's still not enough because a surprise strike from the Fire Spray would still win, as would an attack from the 7th Fleet Defender into the base. So that one is going to be a win for me, and we're going to move on to round 2. So we are playing with sideboarding here. And we're gonna do some sideboarding right now and see how we're gonna make some changes to these decks in order to potentially do better in rounds 2 and 3. So I see that I have the First Legion Snowtrooper, who I have in there as a. This deck has a lot of 1 life units, so I have some bigger units in there to replace it in case I'm against an opponent with a lot of ping damage. So like Vader, for instance, or someone that I need to be running ISB agent, I might want to drop some of those cheap units that are vulnerable to pings. In this case, I'm thinking about swapping in Fifth Brother, but honestly, Fifth Brother doesn't necessarily feel like the thing that I most want here. I think I'm actually pretty okay with where I'm at. So I believe I'm looking at that option and I end up not doing it. And I am going to have a link to the deck list in the video description below. Keep in mind this is an experimental deck. I don't know that this is what this deck is going to look like in the end. In fact, I think it's pretty sure that it will change. At the very least, I want to try and get Waylay in here. Waylay seems like an important card for this sort of archetype, especially with Boba, where you can play it for 2. It's not necessarily the most aggro card in the world, but it is a card that can really inhibit someone's early game in a lot of situations and create a lot of value for you. No Good to Me Dead, of course, also in there right now, a pretty strong one. Now, Waylay also a little situational, probably something that you might be sideboarding out in some matchups. There are some situations where it doesn't really do that much, but yeah. Now let's see here. So we are going to move on to the next round. And once again, it's going to be Aggression Boba versus Command Luke, with myself running the Aggression Boba versus NZ's Command Luke. So we'll see if I can replicate my victory in round 1 here in round 2. Okay, so yeah, let's see how this goes. We're gonna take a look at the opening hand and see what I want to do. So this is a really interesting hand. So I have the Relentless Raider, Force Choke, 2 open fires, a TIE LN, and a Probe Droid. This is This is not a great hand, but it's not terrible either. So looking in terms of resources, I'll probably resource the Raider and one open fire. That leaves me with the ability to lead off with the probe droid and have some removal options as well as potentially the tie. However, I make a little mistake here. I was considering taking a mulligan. Then I thought actually I'll keep it, but then I somehow had messed it up and had different cards there than the ones that I was originally resourcing. So I had to take the full mulligan. And I end up with a hand here that's a little different. So this one's much less reliant on drawing early units, and I think actually I like it a lot fair bit better. So I'm going to be able to do potentially ISB Agent and TILN on the first turn, and then I have Boba Fett Disintegrator as a second turn play or open fire, depending on how things go. My opponent leads off with a restored arc, not a unit that I want to see. The restore on that unit is extremely annoying for me, and it's more than a match for my TIE LN. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to lead off with I'm going to lead off with a little combo here that counters the restored arc. So I'll play the ISB agent, revealing my open fire, 1 damage to the restored arc. And then I'm going to take it out using Tarkin Town to get it off the field and allow my TIE LN to show up uncontested, also removing that restore 1, which could potentially really add up in the course of a game. Um, so Tarkin Town used there wipes that restored arc off the board, and then the TIE LN on the field, looking pretty good after the first turn. Though I did, of course, use my base. Now let's see how this goes. Okay, so it is rough to use your base really early, but in these sorts of aggressive compositions, if the opponent has a unit that can potentially cause you a lot of trouble, I think using that Tarkin Town early on can be highly valid. My opponent brings out Admiral Akbar here, dealing 1 damage to my ISB agent. Another unit that can potentially add up over time with that restore, but not one that's as immediate as that is as immediately threatening because he's not really a good match for the units that I have on the board. Whereas the restored arc would be in a position to easily defeat the tile end that I wanted to play. Opponent takes initiative here, and I'm just gonna go ahead and swing in. I don't actually notice that my opponent has taken initiative at first, so I'm sort of sitting around for a bit, but then I'm like, yeah, okay, 3 damage to the enemy base from the TIE LN and the ISB agent. And then we still have so this turn a little dubious, not the strongest turn in the world. Um, I'm probably going to do ISB agent or I'm sorry, a surprise strike and perhaps play Greedo this turn. My opponent leads off with a takedown, clearing Boba Disintegrator. Not the worst thing that could happen, but it could be worse. Or not the best thing that could happen, but it could be worse. Um, I'm going to go ahead and surprise strike the base there with the ISB agent. So that's going to be 4 damage to the base. The ISB agent, not really the mightiest unit in the world. Um, Arguably, I could actually use that surprise strike to kill Akbar instead, which would prevent my opponent from getting a restore. Both this turn and potentially in future turns. So it is at least conceivable that attacking Akbar with that surprise strike would be better. But, in my estimation, I'm an aggro deck. I'm going for the face, and I want to get that damage on the enemy base quickly and not necessarily be trying to remove units. However, I do think that this is potentially a misplay because I do play Greedo here. And so if I had and my opponent's going to take the initiative, so Akbar can easily defeat Greedo. But the thing is right now that my opponent can because Akbar can pick off Greedo. I'm basically losing 3 damage by having Akbar stay on the field, and it's actually more than that because of the repair. So by doing that surprise strike with the ISB agent into the enemy base, I inflicted 4 damage. Um, but I lost 1 damage that turn because the Tarkin or the Akbar that I didn't kill restored 1. Now I'm going to lose 1 more to restore, and I'm also going to lose the potential damage from Bosk, or I'm from Greedo, not Bosk. And as a result of that, I think it actually would have been better for me to use the surprise strike to take down Admiral Akbar rather than using it on the enemy base there, because it would have set me in a better position than it would have put me in a better position for this next turn. So now we're in a situation where my opponent can play something like um, we could see, another takedown. We could see Yoda plus some two-cost unit. There's a lot of stuff that my opponent could play, but I think the best option for this opponent is just to take out Greedo as soon as possible. Looks like it's going to be an ambush play, though. So it ends up being Colonel Yularen ambushes in and defeats the ISB agent. So this, I think, is a bit of a misplay. It removes one damage from my board and it heals one. But I think it would have been better to just have. I think it would have been considerably better to just have Akbar defeat Greedo. And so because my opponent didn't take that, Greedo gets to attack and hit the base for three. I think Greedo is just the more important unit to remove relative to that ISB agent. My opponent then defeats Greedo with Akbar, but I hit the top deck um, and remove the Colonel Yularen there as a because Colonel Yularen is a potential healing source and better at fighting than Akbar. They're both healing sources, but Yularen can potentially heal more than one per turn and is better at fighting. Akbar should have taken 3 damage here instead of 1. Also, this was a mistake, but we correct it later. My opponent deploys Yoda. I deploy Boba. Boba's going to swing in for 4. And then the TILN hit the enemy base for 2 at some point, and I deploy an Imperial Interceptor, 4 cost 3/2. When played, you may deal 3 damage to a space unit. Obviously low value to deploy that without the when played ability. But again, I'm playing aggro. What I want to do right now is just develop more threats, get more stuff on the board that is going to be doing damage. I want to close out the game before Luke can take control. And right now, my opponent only has 10 life remaining, which does actually mean I have lethal this turn, at least in theory. I have 9 damage on the board, which is not quite lethal, but with the snapshot reflexes, it would be lethal, or with the Fet's Fire Spray that I have in hand. So that's either potentially 1 extra damage or 5 extra damage to the enemy base, depending on which way that ends up going, with the snapshot reflexes being faster. But we'll see how this goes. It's really a situation where once again I'm racing to deal that damage to the enemy base before my opponent can take control of the board. I'm not playing for the long term here. I'm playing for the race. And I think if we start seeing Jedi Luke home one stuff like that, it will be able to defeat me pretty easily. And actually, the restore on those units will also allow my opponent to get rid of a lot of the momentum that I've been building by doing damage early on. So I need to close out the game before that stuff comes out, and that's the game plan. Hopefully, if things go well, we can get a win this turn, and if things don't go well, we'll see what happens. But maybe can cling on for a little longer. My opponent deploys Luke. I'm going to immediately have Boba hit the enemy base for 4. My opponent's going to have Luke swing in there to hit Boba. 4 damage to Luke and a shield on one of his units. And yeah, so each of them take 4 damage. It gives a shield to Yoda. I'm going to just do the damage to the enemy base. So there's the interceptor for 3. If my opponent does not heal with his next action, and does not remove the TIE LN, I can use snapshot reflexes to have it go into the base for 3 and close the game immediately. If my opponent does have some next action that is going to heal, I can then attack normally with the TIE LN and then bring out Fet's Fire Spray. My opponent has a Fleet Lieutenant, tries to do Fleet Lieutenant Yoda to kill Boba, but I point out that Yoda is not a rebel, so the damage bonus from Fleet Lieutenant does not apply. So Fleet Lieutenant 3 cost 3/3, and when played, you may attack with a unit. It gets +2 power for that attack if it is a rebel. Yoda is not a rebel. He has the Force and Jedi traits, but not rebel. And as a result, I point out that that move doesn't work, and my opponent then has Akbar make the attack instead. So with Akbar making the attack, Akbar is a rebel, does get the bonus damage. That is enough to take down Boba, and there's 1 healing on the base as well. So then I'm going to attack with the TIE LN, 2 damage to the base there. My opponent has the Yoda there for 2 more healing, but I bring out Fet's Fire Spray, and unless there's a 3 resource counter to Fet's Fire Spray, that's game because Fet's Fire Spray can attack and win. My opponent only plays a Battlefield Marine, and Fet's Fire Spray hits the base for game. So the main thing that my opponent could have had that would have countered me there would be a copy of um, a copy of Entrenched on Fett's Fire Spray would prevent it from attacking the base. It would also mean that I would basically just have permanent control of the space arena, but it would prevent me from attacking the base this turn. Then my opponent could have potentially made some kind of comeback with Restore in the ground arena. Though honestly, I think it's very unlikely because in that situation, I would have been able to use Snapshot Reflexes on my Interceptor to hit the base for 4 and win the game, given that I would presumably have the initiative. So another solid win there for Aggression Boba, and we're going to move on to game 3. Let's see what can happen. So game 3. This is a pretty quick mulligan there. Doesn't seem like a good hand. And I mulligan into something that at first looked really bad, but then I saw a my deliverance from having a terrible early game, which is the Viper Probe Droid. Viper Probe Droid's a 2-cost 3/2. It'll let me see my opponent's hand and kind of plan out some of my moves, and also is just going to be a relevant body. So 3/2 is actually a pretty good stat line right now, especially against green Luke. You arguably want 3/2s more than you want 2/3s, or even 3/1s maybe more than 2/3s, because that 2-cost 3/3 Alliance Marine is such a menace in the early game. And 3 attack units are able to defeat the Alliance Marine and stay on the board. So, or I'm sorry, not stay on the board, but are able to defeat the Alliance Marine without the Alliance Marine staying on the board. Whereas a 2/3 like the Colonel Yularian, the First Legion Snowtrooper, stuff like that, Alliance Marine just takes out those units and stays on the field, which is a very good situation for your opponent and not what you want. So 3-power early units are maybe in a bit of a better spot right now. My opponent leads off with R2D2 though, and I'm gonna play the Probe Droid. Take a look at my opponent's hand. We see a Restored Arc, a Yoda, and a Takedown. So somewhat annoying for me to see, but the good news is there's not a Wing Leader, there's not a Jedi Lightsaber that can be played onto R2 and just put him in a really commanding position on the ground. So overall, I could be a lot worse. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next turn here. I'm going to get rid of this shoot first here. I don't really need it. Sometimes shoot first can be really good. If you end up with like your tile N staring down a restored arc or a Green Squadron A-Wing, something like that, then shoot first can be just the card that you need. But in this situation, it's not what I want. Arguably, I should have. There's at least an argument that I should actually sideboard out shoot first because it's not. Because this is a matchup where I'm being very aggro, and shoot first is better if it's like against another aggro deck where you're trying to control the board more. Whereas in this situation, I'm not very worried with controlling the board. I'm mostly just pushing damage. So shoot first might not be the best card for me here. I'd much rather have those waylays that I was discussing earlier, for instance, but we'll have to see how this goes. Um, in fact, I think I'm going to change my sideboard right now while I'm recording this video. I'm going to get the Starwing Scouts out of the sideboard, and I'm going to get Waylay in there. Um, Maybe I'll even main deck Waylay and sideboard shoot first. We'll have to see. Um, let's see how this goes. All right, so I'm going to lead this turn off with a snapshot reflexes on my Viper Probe Droid, inflicting 4 damage to the enemy base. The snapshot reflex is also really nice here because the +1 HP means that 2 attacks from R2 will not remove my Probe Droid. Previously, R2 would be able to attack into the Probe Droid, and it would lose the shield to inflict one damage. That's, that then in the next attack, I would take one damage, he would take three damage, and we'd see what would happen. And now we're going to see the restored arc hitting the field that I saw from my opponent earlier. So in this situation, what I can do is I can ISB agent ping the restored arc and use Tarkin Town to kill it, but I end up deciding that I'd rather not. I'm okay with my opponent having a shielded arc here. It could be worse. Um, I'm just going to take the initiative because by taking the initiative, I can basically guarantee that I'm going to get another attack with that probe droid. Another 4 damage to the enemy base. The ISB agent choke reveal. Oh, and actually that's the other reason actually that this would be bad. If I did reveal the ISB agent, my opponent could shield it with Luke, and that would block the Tarkin Town damage. Uh, so now the resourcing here for resource turn. My opponent, so I swing in 4 damage to the enemy base. My opponent hits me with the restored arc, 2 damage to my base, and a one hit points restored. I'm going to bring out Boba Disintegrator here. My opponent spends 4 for a takedown and removes Boba Disintegrator. I actually think it might have been better to defeat the probe droid because the probe droid is 4 damage and Boba is 3 damage. So I think that could have been a situation where there might have been more value to change the target for that play. But yeah. Uh, So my opponent here, R2 is able to attack the base for 1. Opponent could just take the initiative. Ends up being an attack on the probe droid, losing the shield but doing 1 damage there. Looking at the top card. Ends up leaving it back on top. And so now I can potentially ISB agent, but it doesn't seem very valuable to me, so I just take the initiative. And by taking the initiative, I am ensuring even more damage with the little probe droid that could here. I'm just gonna swing on in there, do even more. I have Bosk in hand as well. So this turn I probably want to swing with the probe droid for another 4 damage to the base. Then I can potentially bring in Bosk, pick somebody off, get a resource back. Potentially still have the ISB agent Tarkentown combo. Boba can hit the field this turn, do more damage to the enemy base. I'm feeling pretty good about this scenario. there's the probe droid, another 4 damage. I've gotten 12 damage from this probe droid this game, which is quite a lot. My opponent has a fleet lieutenant. So fleet lieutenant takes out the probe droid, or rather R2 takes out the probe droid buffed by the fleet lieutenant. R2 is also defeated thanks to the snapshot reflexes. Snapshot reflexes getting big value this game, by the way. Really made that probe droid situation a lot better than it might have been otherwise. In fact, huge value, really. Not only did it do 3 damage to the enemy base, it meant R2 died instead of not dying, and it also meant that the probe droid needed more to kill than it would have otherwise. Bosk ambushes in, takes down the fleet lieutenant, using a resource there or readying up a resource with Boba. Now Bosk is on the field. Restored Arc hits me for 2, restoring 1. I can bring out Boba Fett here and hit the enemy base for 4, putting them at 11 life remaining. Opponent takes the initiative, swing into the base for 4, ready 2 resources. Um, I do actually play the ISB agent and ping off the shield. And the reason that I did that here was I have that resource available, and with Bosk, if I play any of these events, I can deal damage. So, for instance, I could surprise strike the enemy base, deal 2 damage to the restored arc, and then be in a position to target town it and get it off the board. So in that situation, it seems like getting the shield off of the restored arc is a reasonable play, putting me into a position where I'm going to be able to deal with it with the events that I have in hand. So. Opponent has the initiative again, ends up where on 6 resources, my opponent uses them to play out Obi-Wan Kenobi. Has Obi-Wan Kenobi, actually, originally was just plain Obi-Wan just straight up, but then I believe realizes, wait, I have a different idea. I can use Obi-Wan with the energy conversion lab to get Bosk off the field completely. Obi-Wan takes 4 damage. So one thing that I could do here is I could use one of these other units that I have on the board to clear Obi-Wan, but under these circumstances, I decide that what I actually want to do is attack and clear him with the Bosk that I have in hand. So he clears me, I clear him. This option means that I have more damage waiting to go into the enemy base. Also, if I attack with Boba here, I'll be able to stand up 2 resources for having defeated Obi-Wan, which will allow me to potentially play a no good to me dead on Luke, or a surprise strike with my ISB agent for even more damage to the enemy base. And at that point, that would also trigger Bosk's ability for 2 damage to an enemy unit. So my opponent gets the 2 experience from Obi-Wan being defeated, from Obi-Wan's when defeated ability, and puts it on the restored arc. Doesn't get to draw a card since Obi-Wan is, of course, not a force unit. That restored arc then attacks in again. My opponent's been getting a lot of value out of the arc, um, but I've been getting more value out of my stuff. So Boba comes in for 4 damage. Luke Skywalker deploys. I've readied up 2 resources here. So I can no good to me dead, exhaust Luke for 2 turns. Bosk's ability does 2 damage to the restored arc. When you play an event, you may deal 2 damage to a unit. So no good to me dead, exhaust a unit, and it can't ready during the regroup phase. Can't ready this turn, including the regroup phase. Then I'll do 3 damage to that restored arc with Tarkin Town, clear it off the board. ISB agent swings in for 1, and this is looking really good. My opponent has Luke on the field, but Luke is going to be exhausted this turn. Won't have the opportunity to make an attack. And meanwhile, my opponent's base is at 6 life, and I have multiple units that can deliver the fatal blow with a surprise strike here. So very interesting scenario. For me, I don't know that there's very much that could save my opponent at this point. We could potentially see another Obi-Wan Kenobi. I could surprise strike that Obi-Wan with Boba, defeat him, and still have a bunch of damage. But actually, I think what would make the most sense if my opponent played another Obi-Wan would be to do Force Choke for 5 damage, attack with the ISB agent to clear him, and then Boba and Bosk can attack and defeat the enemy base. So going into this next turn, Luke should be exhausted here. Opponent does have the initiatives. There will be an opportunity to try and do something, but I'm not sure Not sure what would save my opponent at this point, as the situation's looking very favorable for me. Four resources for a takedown, clears Bosk off the field, and it's not going to be enough because while that does remove some of my options, I now just surprise strike the base with Obi-Wan. That's 7 damage. That's lethal. So another victory here for aggression Boba over Command Luke. Ultimately, I was able to focus on pushing that damage through, getting control, or not getting control of the board. Yeah, in fact, the exact opposite. I don't really care to get control of the board. I'll kill enemy units with incidental stuff if need be, especially if they have a major threat from restore or similar. But mostly I'm just focused on dealing that damage, and in this game in this match I managed to pull that game plan off pretty effectively. I ended up dealing the damage that I needed, and yeah, so that's gonna be a win, 3-0 for Boba Fett collecting the bounty here with the aggro composition into a Command Luke build. And so Boba is a popular deck. Um, but green Boba is a lot more commonly seen than red Boba, and I personally think red Boba is pretty real. So maybe try this out if you want. Maybe don't. I don't know. But I'll have the deck list that I was using in the video description below with at least one change. So I may continue to update this as I play more with this deck and test it out. So you may see some more changes if you're watching this video substantially in the future. But one change that I've already made from this video is that I removed the Starwing Scout from my sideboard and replaced it with Waylay. So yeah, and then I actually moved Waylay to the main deck also and shoot first to the sideboard. So a few little changes there, and we'll have to see where this deck ends up. But at least for now, I think it's something pretty cool. So thanks to you all for watching, and we will be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.